30 countries, one meeting, and a blueprint to dismantle the most powerful economic system the world has ever known. What happened in a Russian city in June 2024 didn't make headline news in the West. And honestly, that silence might be the most telling part of this entire story. Picture this. It's June 2024. A historic Russian city called Nizhny Novgorod, sitting where two great rivers meet, is quietly hosting the largest diplomatic gathering in BRICS history. Foreign ministers, senior diplomats, and top government representatives from 22 countries are walking through the same doors, sitting across from each other, and debating one enormous question. What should the global economy look like? And who should actually be in charge of it? This isn't the G7. This isn't the United Nations Security Council. There are no American or European hosts. And yet the decisions being shaped in those meeting rooms could affect every single person watching this video, whether you live in Lagos, Jakarta, London, or São Paulo. Because here's what the mainstream media isn't telling you clearly enough. The world is splitting, and BRICS is right at the center of that split. BRICS didn't start as a geopolitical alliance. It started as a Goldman Sachs research paper. In 2001, British economist Jim O'Neill coined the term BRIC to describe four emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, that he believed would reshape global growth within decades. It was an analyst's observation, a footnote in a financial report. But something unexpected happened. The countries themselves took the idea seriously. By 2009, the first formal BRICS summit took place in Russia. South Africa joined in 2010, and what began as an economic concept became a real geopolitical identity, a gathering of nations that shared one common feeling, that the international system wasn't built for them, and it wasn't working in their favor. For years, Western analysts dismissed BRICS as too divided to matter. China and India share contested borders and a long history of rivalry. Brazil, Russia, and South Africa operate in completely different economic environments. How could they possibly align? But then, the world handed BRICS the best recruitment pitch it could have asked for. The 2008 financial crisis exposed just how fragile the dollar-dominated system really was. The COVID-19 pandemic showed developing nations how little control they had over their own economic destinies. And then, in 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the Western response, particularly the use of financial sanctions to freeze Russian assets and cut the country off from the SWIFT banking system, sent a chill through governments across the global South. The message was unmistakable. If you hold your reserves in dollars, if your trade runs through Western financial infrastructure, you are permanently vulnerable to decisions made in Washington, decisions that may have nothing to do with your country and everything to do with American foreign policy. BRICS suddenly wasn't just an interesting forum. It was a potential lifeline. The real turning point came in August 2023 at the 15th BRICS Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. For the first time in the bloc's history, BRICS opened its membership. 6 new countries were formally invited to join: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Argentina. Argentina ultimately declined under its new government, but the other 5, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, officially joined in January 2024. Let that sink in for a second. Saudi Arabia, the country whose oil pricing deal with the United States created the petrodollar system that has anchored the dollar's global dominance for 50 years, is now a BRICS member. The UAE, one of the world's most significant trade and financial hubs, is now at the table. Iran, isolated from the Western financial system for decades, is in. Together with the original 5, this expanded 9-member bloc now represents more than 35% of global GDP measured by purchasing power. It covers roughly 45% of the world's population. It sits on top of a significant portion of the world's oil reserves, rare earth minerals, agricultural land, and freshwater. And the queue outside the door just kept getting longer. So let's head back to June 2024 and that historic meeting. The structure of the two-day gathering really shows how BRICS is positioning itself for the future. On the first day, the 9 full members sat together, discussing global governance reform, reducing dollar dependence in trade, and building alternative financial mechanisms. The conversation was direct. How do we create a payment infrastructure that doesn't run through systems that can be switched off by Western governments? But honestly, the second day was where things got really interesting. The meeting expanded to include delegations from Bangladesh, Bahrain, Belarus, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Laos, Mauritania, Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Turkey, Venezuela, and Vietnam. Now, these weren't full members. They were participants in what organizers called the BRICS Dialogue with Developing Countries, a formal platform for a wider circle of nations to engage with the bloc, share their interests, and start building relationships. 22 countries in one room. No Western veto. No IMF conditions attached. And, all of it was pointing toward one destination. The 16th BRICS Summit in Kazan, Russia, in October 2024, where the next chapter of this story would be written. Now here's the number that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. Beyond the existing 9 members and the countries at the June dialogue, reporting from multiple international diplomatic sources indicates that about 30 additional countries have expressed some level of interest in joining BRICS or building a formal partnership with the bloc. 30 countries. So who are they? And what does each one bring to the table? Let's walk through the most important ones, because honestly, each story here tells you something different about why this movement is growing so fast. Nigeria, Africa's economic heavyweight. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, with a GDP of around $448 billion and a population exceeding 200 million. It's the continent's top oil producer. But what makes Nigeria's candidacy genuinely exciting is what's happening beyond the oil sector. Lagos has become one of Africa's most vibrant technology and fintech hubs, attracting billions in global investment and producing a generation of digitally native entrepreneurs. For BRICS, Nigeria would bring continental authority, the weight needed to accelerate the bloc's influence across all of sub-Saharan Africa. For Nigeria, BRICS means access to trade and financing frameworks that don't come loaded with Western policy conditions. Indonesia, the archipelago giant. Southeast Asia's largest economy sits at a GDP of over $1.7 trillion, with nearly 275 million people. Indonesia produces coal, nickel, palm oil, and rubber. Its digital economy is one of the fastest growing in Asia, and its geographic position, controlling some of the world's most critical shipping lanes, makes it strategically irreplaceable. Indonesia has long maintained a carefully balanced foreign policy, keeping relationships with both Beijing and Washington, while asserting independence through its historical leadership of the non-aligned movement. BRICS fits perfectly into that tradition. Mexico, the surprising wild card. Mexico might be the most geopolitically surprising name on this entire list. With a GDP of approximately $1.27 trillion and deep integration into North American supply chains, Mexico sends roughly 80% of its exports to the United States. That relationship is both its greatest strength and its greatest vulnerability, and Mexico knows it. Any serious BRICS engagement by Mexico would be a remarkable geopolitical balancing act, maintaining its deep North American ties, while simultaneously building alternative economic relationships. But that tension is exactly why it matters. It signals that even countries deeply tied to the American system are quietly exploring what comes next. Turkey, the NATO member, playing both sides. Turkey might be the most strategically audacious candidacy of all. A NATO member, a country hosting American military installations, a formal EU membership candidate for decades, and yet, President Erdogan's government has been publicly and explicitly interested in BRICS membership. With a GDP approaching $942 billion and a population of over 84 million, Turkey controls the Bosphorus and Dardanelles, two of the world's most strategically critical maritime passages. Its military is one of NATO's largest. Its economy spans manufacturing, tourism, agriculture, and financial services. Ankara's BRICS interest isn't necessarily about abandoning the West. It's about leverage. A NATO member seriously flirting with BRICS is a seismic crack in the Western alliance architecture, and everyone involved knows it. Malaysia, Pakistan, Vietnam. Malaysia brings semiconductor manufacturing and palm oil dominance, along with a prime minister who has been vocal about reducing dollar dependence. Pakistan offers its strategic corridor between South Asia and Central Asia, its massive textile industry, and a population of over 228 million. Vietnam, one of Asia's greatest economic success stories, brings electronics manufacturing, growing industrial capacity, and a strategic Southeast Asian location. Kazakhstan, Bangladesh, Bahrain. Kazakhstan contributes massive oil, gas, and uranium reserves, crucial for any bloc serious about energy security. Bangladesh is the world's second-largest garment exporter, central to global fashion supply chains. Bahrain brings financial services expertise and Gulf market access that complements Saudi Arabia's energy weight. Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, over 300 billion barrels, even as its economy has been severely damaged by mismanagement and Western sanctions. Cuba's 6 decades under American sanctions make it one of the most symbolically powerful candidates. Its BRICS participation would be a direct statement about sovereignty. Nicaragua, developing its geothermal energy sector, represents the growing Central American interest in alternative frameworks. Sudan, Tunisia, Zimbabwe, Senegal. Sudan has significant agricultural land and gold mining potential, despite devastating ongoing conflict. Tunisia offers a Mediterranean bridge between Africa and Europe with an educated workforce. Zimbabwe is rich in minerals and diamonds. Senegal, with emerging offshore oil discoveries, could be one of West Africa's next great economic stories. Step back from the individual countries for a moment. Look at the whole picture. Every nation on this list connects to the same underlying story, a deep and growing dissatisfaction with how the current global economic system works. And honestly, who it works for. For decades, developing countries that needed financing had to go to the IMF or the World Bank. Those institutions came with conditions: structural adjustment programs, austerity requirements, privatization demands that often caused real pain for ordinary citizens while benefiting foreign investors. Countries had little choice but to accept because, well, there was nowhere else to go. BRICS is not a perfect alternative. Its internal contradictions are real and significant. China accounts for roughly 70% of the bloc's combined GDP. That kind of imbalance creates genuine tensions, particularly with India, which is simultaneously a BRICS member and China's most significant regional rival. The idea of a shared BRICS currency, regularly discussed at summits, faces enormous practical obstacles. The dollar's structural advantages, built over a century, won't disappear in a decade. But here's what matters. BRICS doesn't need to be perfect to be significant. It just needs to be an alternative. And for 30 countries currently lined up outside its door, the existence of a credible alternative, however imperfect, changes the entire negotiating dynamic with the institutions that previously held monopoly power over development financing. That's not a small thing. That's actually enormous. Here is what gets lost when we talk about BRICS in purely strategic or economic terms. This is not just a story about governments and GDP figures. It's a story about people. Nigerian farmers who can't access affordable credit. Pakistani textile workers whose wages get eroded by currency crises, triggered by distant monetary decisions. Venezuelan families unable to get medicine because sanctions block their hospitals from international supply chains. Bangladeshi garment workers stitching clothes for global brands while having zero voice in the trade rules that govern their lives. The 700 million people still living on less than $2.15 a day, as the World Bank estimates, the overwhelming majority of them live in countries that are either BRICS members or BRICS-aspiring nations. When you understand those realities, the queue outside BRICS's door looks less like a geopolitical chess game and more like something much more human, a collective demand for dignity, agency, and a fair shot at prosperity. So, what does all of this mean for the world we're actually living in? We are at a genuine inflection point. The economic order built after World War II, centered on the dollar, governed by Western-led institutions, and designed largely by and for wealthy nations, is being openly challenged at a scale we haven't seen since the Cold War. The question isn't whether BRICS will overnight replace the Western system. It won't, not next year, probably not this decade. But the question that actually matters is different and far more consequential. Are we moving toward a world where no single country or bloc can dictate the rules for everyone else? Or are we heading toward a more fragmented, more unpredictable world where competing power blocs create new walls instead of new opportunities? That outcome is not written yet. It depends on choices being made right now. In summit halls, in bilateral meetings, in the quiet conversations between diplomats that never make the news. What BRICS tells us, clearly and unmistakably, is that tens of countries representing billions of people are done being passive passengers in a system that wasn't designed with them in mind. They want a seat at the table where the real decisions get made. 30 countries are knocking on the door. And whether that door opens to a fairer world or to something far more complicated is the defining question of our era. That's the BRICS story, and it's still being written right now in foreign ministries and summit halls across the world. If this video helped you see the global picture more clearly, do one thing: hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who want to understand the forces actually shaping our world, not just the headlines. Subscribe if you aren't already. Because this is exactly the kind of story we cover here. The deep shifts, the untold angles, the geopolitical currents running underneath the daily news cycle. And drop a comment. Do you think BRICS represents a genuine step toward a more equitable world order? Or is it something more complicated than that? Tell us what you think. We read every single one. Thank you for being here. Stay curious, stay informed, because the world doesn't change in a single summit. But sometimes, a single summit is exactly where you can see which direction it's heading.